Thank you for listening to Rallen's Rant. We're coming up to nearly 4 years since my first ever podcast. I'd like to thank everyone for supporting me up until this point. I'd also like to take this chance to thank everyone who's donated to the podcast through my Patreon page. There's a link under all my podcast links, and any donations go an absolutely huge and very long way in making this podcast continue to grow and exist. So thank you for all your support up until this point. Welcome to the latest episode of Rallen's Rant. Today I'm joined by a very special guest, no other than my father. David, welcome on the show. It has been 4 years in the making to get you on, but we finally have got a 45-50 minute period in which you're able to come on. So I want to thank you for that. So how are you getting on today?
Well, listen, I would have been on earlier, but I had a small issue with the security forces. I was in Mountjoy for 5 years for fraud. But now that I'm out, I'm more than happy to talk to you.
Fantastic. Well, what I do with most of my guests is I get them to think about back to their childhood. And when you think back to your childhood, what are some of the earliest memories you have, whether they're good or bad? What has stuck with you to now?
Well, that's a very good question, Richie. I remember I was born at a very early age in 1953 in Coombe Hospital, within the sound of the Liberty Bell. So I am a true dub. The earliest memories I would have, I think my sister, who is my Irish twin, she was born a year earlier than I was, on the 3rd of August, the same date as I was, but a year in between, so that's kind of an Irish twin. We were renting a house in Sundrive, near Kimmage. I think it was my mother and my father, my sister Ruth, myself, and we might have been, and my sister Jean. And the vivid memory I have is on Sundrive Corner, when we were kids, about 5 or 6 years of age, 7. Christy Brown used to be on that corner outside. He lived in Kimmage, and he was in his wheelchair with his left foot, asking people to go in and get him fags, and he was a local celebrity. And I vividly remember once him kicking somebody in the groin who wouldn't go into to get him a packet of Carol's cigarettes, and insulting him. And that to this day is a memory I have. And also the people beside us in the house were 3 black doctors from Nigeria, which when you think about the 50s and early 60s, the only black person anybody saw was on a Hollywood movie, Sidney Poitier or something. This was amazing. But there were 3 Nigerian doctors who worked in the health service way back, and they were the only black people any of us ever saw. It was amazing. Strange time, very backward time, very bizarre time. Ireland was poor, church-ridden, no pun intended. No pun intended. The subsidy came out, so it was a pretty miserable dump, as I would say. So I grew up in what was only described as the bleak 50s, the bleaker 60s, and the slightly better 70s.
Mm. And when you think of your childhood, one of the biggest impacts I've had, and I'm only 25 now, but my college years and my schoolboy years, that shaped my humour, it shaped my pros, my cons to my characteristic or my character makeup. And you went to Temple Oak, and you've no shyness about
no,
saying...
well, Richie, I have to bring you back to before I went to Temple Oak. I was a very extraordinarily bright guy, a young guy, 12 or 12 years of age. And in those days, we used to do scholarships. You do exams to see whether you get into Sing Street, which is the alma mater of Gay Byrne and a number of other notaries in the world. And I got into Sing Street in 500 applied, and I got in the top 20. And I was sent into Sing Street. But in Sing Street, they had an alpha class. It didn't mean you were going to be beaten any less or whipped any less. It was just that everything you had to learn was in Irish, Oskelga, as we used to call it. So you learn physics, chemistry, biology, English, geography, history, Oskelga. And I arrived in that place, and to this day, it was a harrowing experience. There were some beautiful brothers, but there was some right animals. In fact, one of the priests there was called the animal. He was...
What's he get up to?
He would have been kicked out of the Gestapo for cruelty. He was an absolute animal. He had straps embedded with coins, which he used to beat the shit out of us, even if you coughed inadvertently. So anyway, at the end, I came home one day on the bus. I used to travel on the bus. I used to travel on the bus when I was 7 or 8 years of age. All kids used to get on the bus. Nowadays, we have the big Sherman tanks driving little Johnny down to St. Michael's in case he sort of can't walk 60 yards to school. So I, in those days, used to go home and from Sing Street, and I said to my mother, and she said, "What's wrong with your hands?" I said, "Well, they look like baseball gloves because I was beaten so much." And she said, "Right, you're not going back to Sing Street." So I went to Temple Oak College in my second year and became what could only be described as a superstar of the school in every sense of the word. An athlete, a rugby hero. I became president of the school in my final year. When I made a public address, they all asked the candidates who were going to be president of Temple Oak College to make a speech. I, of course, was the outsider in the presidential race, but I had about 20-1 until I made my speech. And I said, well, at the end of my speech, if I win this election, Father, I won't mention the man's name, he's dead now, but a noted paedophile. I said, if I win, Father will be going back to West Africa on the mission. Because he said to me on the way in, he said, "David, if you win this election, I'm packing my bags and going back to West Africa because it'd be a total injustice." I did win it. I got 98% of the vote, and I became president of the school in Temple Oak. Also, I was a noted rugby player playing semi-final in Donnybrook in front of my father, my dear father, who is RIP now, and he's not dead, he's just RIP. So I had long red hair in those days, which was akin to have leprosy. You know, as you know, if you were a ginger in those days, people used to sort of say, "My God, what are you suffering from?" I said, "No, I'm just red-haired."
Same today.
So semi-final in which we lost Chernier. One of the Flannery brothers went over in the 87th minute and beat us, and we got to the quarterfinals against Blackrock, and of course they did give us a good thrashing in those days. But I had a happy life in the Holy Ghost. Imagine, I can't believe any. If you're going to do a religion and a sect, that you would say, "And now would you like to join the Holy Ghosts?" I'm only 7 years of age. But you want to join the Holy Ghost? The Holy Ghosts? What kind of marketing is that? Of course, they changed it now. Now it's the Spirit and Fathers, as we all know.
Yeah. And you get through your 6 years of senior school and the amount of experiences, whether it's sports related or even, as you said, becoming the president with your ginger locks, which must have been some uphill task to begin with. But that leads you to the graduation period. And back in those days, to give it a bit of context, nowadays most 18, 19-year-olds having a clue what they want to do in college, what they want to do 5 years down the line, what is the stage of the economy we're going into. Like, what was it like finishing school? Like, what was the expectations on you when you finished your leaving cert? Was it just to graft? Was it to go to college? Was it to get work straight away? Like, what transpired the year or two after you finished your leaving cert with Temple Oak?
Yeah, well, you have to remember, in the late 70s, Ireland was, pardon the French, a shithole. There was no jobs. And I got a job in the Turf Club, which was run by Lord such and such, who was upstairs. And we used to do all the, dare I say, the racing cards and all the applications for horse racing and the veterinary introductions to all the race meeting. Everybody had to be cleared, etc., etc. So I worked there for a couple of months, and then I went to UCD to study commerce, and I was no more interested in commerce or business or anything. It was something I just drifted into. But it was a strange time. It was the first year of Belfield. It was a crazy place. It was during the time of the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Every newspaper you used to read was horror. The Miami show band being massacred, bombs going off, the most horrific things. For a young person, it was a dreadful, dreadful time to live. But having said that, it was counteracted by some of the greatest music we have ever experienced, from the Stones to the Beatles to all the great rock bands and Elton John. So there was a vibrancy to being young, even though in Ireland it was counteracted by a lot of violence and horror. But it was a great time to be young. We didn't feel that we were poor, but the joy going into Grafton Street and into Switzer's and into Captain America's, which just opened way back in the 70s. Listening to Chris de Burgh playing the piano, and Phil Lynott walking around Grafton Street like he was a troubadour. These were great times. But when you're young, sometimes you just have nothing but optimism. And I think we did. We had nothing. We had no phones. If you wanted to make a phone call, you went to a local phone box and tried to dial a number, and you realized that some couple of guys kicked the whole thing in and robbed the money. So, which is a good sign, because, if you're going to be late for a date, phone box was burned down and I couldn't ring you,
Yeah.
So these were the times we lived in.
Okay. And as you said, Belfield, UCD had only just started, and you started doing commerce, which nowadays is such a mainstay of just college life of the person from Dublin. People want to go to UCD, go to your Trinities, and as you said, back then the country was nowhere half as established as it is now, both as a vibrant, like, kind of tourist destination to even a place that, has so many great colleges and educational systems, because it was just a different time. But what transpired when you finished commerce? You get your degree, or I'm only presuming you got your degree unless you're hiding something from me. Where does that leave you? When you get a college degree in Dublin, more often than not, you know someone that can get you a job, or else someone knows another person that can get you a job. Like, where did that leave you? You've got a piece of paper in your hand.
Yeah, well, listen, at the end of, say, the middle 70s, as I said, Ireland was a bleak place. Very little opportunity for what we used to call traditional Irish Catholics. All the solicitors' practices, the accountancy practices, all of the major industries, from Guinness to, any industry you can think of was owned by what we call the Protestant ascendancy classes. So, Craig Gardner, which was an old Protestant accounting firm, decided to sort of break that mold way back in the 1970s. And they had a scholarship for people who got certain marks in their second year in the BCom. And I, funnily enough, I have no idea how I did it. I got 100% in maths in the second year. It must have been a fluke, but I got it.
Did you cheat?
And they offered me a job. And this is a very old, staunch Protestant. It's now PricewaterhouseCoopers, the biggest firm in the world. But Craig Gardner in those days was run by a very old Quaker, decent Protestant firm. They had all the Protestant companies. They had Guinness and everything, and all the. So I suddenly got in there. I couldn't believe it, and so did Paul Coulson, who is now one of the richest men in the world. Loads of other guys who have made it over their lives. It was an amazing breakthrough. They realized that they couldn't keep employing the same stereotypical Protestant boy. They knew Ireland was changing. They knew that the education that was free education that was started by O'Malley in 1966 for free education for everybody. Trinity opened up their first Catholic student in 1969, I think. Before it was only Protestants only. So the world was changing. It was a revolution. And Craig Gardner, in fairness to them, they started to bring in, but rather than being a son of a very wealthy merchant, Protestant, they brought in talent. I'm not saying I was talented, but they brought in
supposed talent.
People from UCD rather than just from Trinity. But we have so many great names that I was with that time. And I'm not mentioning Coulson, I've just been, was many others. And we were the vanguard of the breaking down of this religious, stereotypical, somebody who's Protestant works for Craig Gardner, and somebody who's a Catholic works for, it was Stokes Kennedy Crowley in those days, a very small firm. Same in the legal profession. But that is the 70s for you. We had just come out of what I would describe as a very strange world where everybody was Protestant, Catholic, wealth, no wealth, poverty, inherited wealth. So it was a revolution. And I feel it was a wonderful time to be young in that revolution.
So everything was obviously changing, which to my extent I haven't got to feel that huge change yet in my lifetime where you've gone to this is a real shifting of the guard, or times have really changed. Perhaps after this virus there could be cultural changes and whatnot, and social norms do change for future generations. But when you get that work, like, do you find yourself saying, okay, I've got work now, I've gone through college, Ireland is still the place for me to be? Because I know you end up going over to England at one stage. Like, was it still an uncertain time economically in the country that, say, led you over to London or England or wherever you were based in that time? Or was it just purely circumstance that made you eventually cross?
Well, I didn't. I only went to England to work in a bar when I was going through college, not when I was training. Not when I was training. I worked down the Millwall docks in the pub when I was to get my university fees. In those days, there were only about 300, as you say, punts.
How did that work though? As in your college and UCD? Yeah.
Yeah, you had to go. I worked in the pub and got our university. And because my father, I'm not saying he hadn't got the money. He hadn't really. He was relatively. He's a teacher. So he said, "Listen, you do. If you want to go to college, you work and get your college fees." And that's the way we did in those days. Parents didn't give their children anything because they were poor and they were trying to survive themselves. So people who got through life in those days had to really work during the summer, even work during their college times to pay for their own, because it never came apart from unless you were extraordinarily wealthy, which there was very few in Ireland. But anyway, I joined Craiggardens, and two of the funny stories, just to lighten up the mood, was I was a bit, I was a bit of a long-haired ginger in those days, and
still are.
Yeah, and I always remember one of the most stupid things I did. I was doing an audit as a junior in Wiggins Teep, which was the paper manufacturer who produces envelopes and sleeves of paper for all business. And I was at a disco one night, on a Saturday night. I met this a girl from Glasgow, and I had a slow dance with her, which I thought was kind of the start of a relationship, which we obviously didn't, and tried to threw a few moves on her. And she said, "Listen, I'll give you my number." In those days, you used to give the address and write to me. So she gave me her address in Glasgow. So I went into Wiggins Teep, and I was doing a bit of the auditing business, and I wrote her a letter saying how much I liked her and everything, and I'd love to meet her again, and blah, blah, blah. And I sealed the envelope, and Wiggins Teep had what used to be in the old days a franking machine, which used to post all letters out to business. So I threw my letter in there with the address she gave me. And a week later, I arrived into the canteen to all the workers there, laughing their heads off, as my letter was presented on the wall in the message board. Return to sender, address unknown. Opened. To which I was dragged in by Gordon Buttonshaw, who was the head partner, who accused me of misappropriation and downright stupidity for not paying for the stamp, to which she obviously gave me the wrong address. So, and they all the staff in Wiggins Teep read my stupid letter. Anyway, that's just one of the many things. And the other time I was walking along California Heights, which is in Ballyfermot, which an umbrella,
ironically named,
which is now the Uniphar. It was a pharmaceutical company. It was it is California Heights, and I was walking with my umbrella to an audit, and a wind gusted me, and I flew into this pond, an ornamental pond outside the accounting area, to which everybody looked out and saw me. So there are two highlights of my time as an auditor, a young auditor in Craiggardens.
And what evolved, what came next in the journey of yourself? And before we get on to the marriage and why I'm here talking to you now, but like what happened in between those years, like your mid-20s to maybe early 30s, which ultimately shaped you to what you became and the line of work in which you eventually came into.
Yeah.
And you got to experience, the Celtic Tiger, or the tail end of the Celtic Tiger before its final meow. But what came?
Well, and I must say, and I always would say to my sons as well, your 20s are your great years. Your 30s are the not so great years. And the 40s are the responsibility years. The 50s are, holy shit, where's my hair gone? And the 60s is, I couldn't give a shit. 70s is, take me now, Lord, because so my 20s were great. I moved from Craig Gardner to ACC, even in the middle of a dreadful recession. But I had a very good job. I had 2 houses in Bowden Park. I met a lovely girl called Jared Fitzpatrick, Ivor Fitzpatrick's sister. We were in love, and I won't mention anything about the sex in case the war department talks about it. But it was a wonderful time. But she was borderline radio rental, but great fun. And I had a ball. I moved in circles which I never thought I'd move in. The biggest, richest people in Ireland who had money in those days, and but it was a very sad time. And then I bought McDaids pub with a great pal of mine, Paul Keaveney. We were heroes at 32. You know, we had a pub, we had a job, we had Rod Stewart coming in from the hotel, ZZ Top, Elton John. It was a great time to be alive. It was a wonderful time. And then I met your mother one night after closing up in McDaids. I went to Gigi's, as I say, howling for love. And she was there with her friend Alfonsina. I was half thinking of asking Alfonsina up, but as fate would have it, I said to Claire, would you like to dance? And the rest, dare I say it, is not history, but there was more drama to come.
Yeah. Oh, to say the very least, yeah. And just to park that with meeting Colette, all that stuff, I want to push that just away for a quick second. And with, do you want more? Get that into you. So with regards to the McDaids pub, you were in college working, and then that's a slightly different line of work, managing a bar. But with regards to that, because McDaids still exists now, and it's still one of the well-known pubs, and as you said, it's beside the Westbury. I've seen countless celebrities floating around there. Like, what did that teach you about business, about life in general, own such an influential pub? Because back then, as you said...
Well, it didn't teach me a lot, because I know when I go into McDaids, everything you see there is everything I designed with a great old pal of mine, Jim McNaughton from Tile Style. But we designed that place. So I almost feel like when I go in there, it's me and Jim McNaughton with the tiles, the murals, the way it was designed. And I just feel there's a part of me there that we created that. But I just feel when I go in there, that's a place or a part of me that I did. And we created something very nice. It was an old Moravian church. It was a preserved building, etc., etc. But, and anybody young listening should always remember, life is all about experiences. You never have any regrets. You never worry about your failures. You never worry. It wasn't a failure. I never thought McDaids was a failure. I thought it was a great success. But I'm still proud when I go in there for a drink and I look around and I say, everything in there is what I designed with Jim McNaughton. So there's a part of me there. So I'm happy. And at the end of the day, you can't judge, something on a material basis. You have to look on the aesthetic, which that McDaids has been there for since we did the whole renovation, and great artists who are great pub guys who did it for nothing. So it stands a good legacy. Yeah.
Yeah, well said. And before I get into the trials and tribulations of marriage, of anything else related to that, I want to talk about your final years as a working man in a business, working in finance, working in the IFSC, encountering what now is like just everyone recalls the Celtic Tiger. And like the last few years was you building up towards, now it will always be etched. And even with COVID-19 now, there could be another massive recession ahead of us. But the Celtic Tiger and the end of that is still, the ripples are still felt today. Like, what was it like working in that time when the boom was there, the boom was back, so to speak? Did you see it coming?
Well, you jumped, Richie, a little bit, because when I worked in ACC, we were doing a lot of liquidations, and a lot of big meat factories were closing down. It was a horrible time in the late 70s, and then I left ACC, and I set up this company called David F. Allen Associates in Hatch Street, and I was before I met your mother. I had a little office. There was a phone that never rang, and downstairs was these old dears used to do secretarial work. So I sent out leaflets to everybody that I used to know in ACC and all the business I used to know, and I used to sit there. That was 1986, and then I had some shares in the stock market. I thought I was doing all right. I had an apartment in Wellington House in Wellington Road. I was free and single, and then in 1987 the stock market crashed. I was rented an apartment in Wellington Road. I rang up my broker, Shay Morris, who's a great friend of mine to this day. I said, Shay, what's happening? He said, David, the market's crashed. I said, can I sell anything? Sell anything? There's no bids. I said, I'll make a bid. He said, no, you can't make a bid because you're selling. So I always remember that. And I was there 3 years building up David F. Allen Associates. I got involved in a number of ventures there, including a very profitable business called Tide UK. And I won't mention, I'll talk to you privately about that relationship. Met a lot of people, did a lot of things, and then I got a job I was headhunted by AIB for the new IFSC operation, which meant you have to get on an airplane, go away for a week, come back with a deal, or you're dead. So I joined this team of specialists in AIB at 36 years of age. And we were given all the resources. And it was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. Was AIB, and all of the companies, I'd say without exception, was those 10 guys in AIB brought them into the IFSC. All the big names, all the great names you see now, we brought them in.
Okay.
And this is where it leads. Go on.
And where does it lead to?
Well, it led to an amazing opportunity for me and for you and your mother and everything. On our marketing trip, I went to Germany, to Berlin. After the wall came down in 1989, all the German banks came together and with the German government, and they created this massive big bank called Bankgesellschaft Berlin. So I was in charge of Germany. Ich spreche bisschen Deutsch, tut mir leid. Wie heißen Sie? And what time is the pub closing at? So So I went to Berlin to try to convince these people to come to Ireland and set up a subsidiary. And that's, I remember I said I'll make as Robert would call it, a pitch. And I said, how many people are going to be there? And the man said, oh, well, we have all our people. So I went to this big town hall, big conference centre, to make this pitch. I thought I was going to meet in an office, but there was 300 people there, sitting, waiting for me. Why should we set up in Ireland? So with a smattering of Deutsch and English, I think it was probably better at English. Was I? No, I wasn't. I was better at Deutsch. So I convinced them that they should consider it. And then the rest is history. They offered me in a private meeting with a great pal of mine. He said, David, I met him in a restaurant tomorrow. He said, David, now we need to talk about setting up the business, but who are we going to get as our chief executive? And I said, well, what kind of money are you talking about? We're talking about maybe we paid the best money. We paid 150,000. Sorry. Are you all right, David? No, I just think I'm having a heart attack. Anyway, he said, do you think you could find somebody like who would take that job? I said, I think I probably could. Me. So that's how it all happened.
And what was that time like, being head of such an organisation? I've seen pictures of you with Bertie O'Hearn at the time.
Bertie O'Hearn?
O'Hearn.
Bertie, that's what he used to call him. I met so many celebrities. I was a big swinging dick. Somebody said I was the best paid IFSC chief executive. There's limos everywhere. It was an amazing time. We brought your mother to Bermuda, New York. It was a halcyon time in the late 90s and early noughties. It was so unreal, the amount of money we were all making. And when you were young and Robert was young, we had chauffeurs driving you here. We went down to Bardstown Bowls. We were the Corps. We had everything. We had a life. We were in the Waldorf Astoria. It was an unreal, surreal world. And we realized it had to come to an end. It was like all these great booms. People and the Irish lost the run themselves. But don't criticize them for doing that, because we never had it before.
Yeah.
We never had anything like this great wealth. It wasn't even great wealth by American standards, but we were doing things. We're traveling the world. People could go on their holidays. People could go to Spain. They could go to, I'm going to California. Hello. That's the first time anybody has gone to California in the last 50 years in Ireland. Normally it's some Hollywood stars would come over and visit from California. But this was a revolution of people with money. First time they ever had felt proud that they were doing things. But it was illusory. And the whole party was like the big punch bowl was taken away and everybody just had to sober up.
Yeah, and that's still well documented today. And to get away from that, the period of your work and stuff like that, and talk a bit more about family life, which a lot of people argue is the most important. And especially in times like now with COVID-19, all people think about now is really their health and their family and friends. And you got married, ended up having 2 kids and 1 adoption, as you like to say. 3 kids. But just to lighten up the mood a little bit, like, what are some of the I don't want to say disasters because nothing's ever a disaster, but there were some holidays that I think back, and my brothers would think back to, or even you and Colette would think back to. Is there any periods where we went off as a family and you look back on and went, Jesus, that was some roller coaster for better or worse? Because there's a certain few ones in my head, whether it was the diarrhea in Val de Lobo or even myself getting lost in Florida. Is there any that stick out, considering we've been on many, many, many family holidays over the years?
Well, all I can say is, Richard, when you become a parent and you have three, what I would describe as wild men, as you all turned out to be, all disparate, different personalities. It is what we were doing with your mother, who's a bit flighty, And when in Florida, when we were there, we were down to Disneyland, and I said, Colette, I'm going to book in with all the 6 suitcases that I had to lug from the car. There was more sweating like a priest in a creche. And I said, listen, will you look after the 3 of them? Yes, I will. To which he immediately gravitated like, the universe, a gravity into the black hole of shopping, and left Richie to walk over across the motorway into a golf course. So I always remember that. And I said, Colette, where's Richie? Oh, I don't know. I was just having a look at the shops. The shops? It's a hotel. It's not a shopping mall. Where is he? And happily you can. But there was wonderful, wonderful Penina. You were very young, and Mark was very young. And Robert, the swimming pool, it's just the memories of when you were young. And that's what I say as an old man now, the memories of when you were a child, or my 3 sons were a child, are the most vivid and most beautiful memories. Just to Mary Black, when she was interviewed recently, she said, you know what she'd love if she was given a wish is to go back to the time our children were really young, like 8, 9, 5, 6, and just to go to them and hug them. And that to me was the most poignant, beautiful, beautiful statement by any parent. They would like to go back in time and see their 3, 5, 2, 1 children, and just go back to when they were babies or young, not babies, just young, and just give them a big hug.
Yeah, well said. I can only imagine. And that also gets me on to a little topic, a light-hearted topic, and a stressful one at that.
Yeah.
But you being the father of 3 kids meant that you had to raise them. You had to see them go through school and on to college. But was there anything during the school years, and there was definitely a few ups and downs, whether it was with myself, Mark and Robert, we had our fair share of run-ins with teachers. I conveniently went back and actually worked in the school as a coach and also as a teaching assistant. But was there any particular moments when you think of your kids in school? Is there any stories you look back on and went, geez, that was rather mental?
Well, Robert was the first, obviously, to go. And he had the impish, boyish, adrenaline fused. I don't know what it was with Robert. He just was so excitable and excited. He wanted to be the center of attention. He
still does.
Was driven by being the leader of the pack. He had to be the man that did it. He did get into a couple of scrapes by dropping his trousers in front of some of the yummy mummies years ago, but I'm sure that police have overlooked that. Mark was the shy one. He was the one who thought he should have been living in Darndale, but he ended up in St. Michael's. And that's what I always found about Mark. He said, rugby, effing hate the fucking place, they don't play ball here, they don't rob cars. And I said, Mark, just calm down with you, for God's sake. A revolution is all about not actually in violence against your own status. Richie, you were the man that all of a sudden arrived from planet Zog, landed in Paradiso Perfecto, St. Michael. This was your nirvana. It was, Richie, you're brilliant. You're a great rugby player. Thanks very much. You're not very good at school. No, who gives a shit about that? And you were adored. You had so much talent, and all of a sudden you just seemed to just morph into St. Michael. You were a boy who loved being in St. Michael's College, and you felt happy there, and you felt respected, and you felt energized. You felt you were a part of something, and you, as it shows, you loved it. And the only thing I can say about anybody who ever goes to school, I don't give a shit whether they get 8 honours and 950,000 points in the Leaving Cert, if they don't go through their happy adolescence and feel they've achieved something happy, well, it's been a waste of time.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's, I think, the biggest credit I can give to the school is that I'm still 25, and the amount of times I'm with people from other schools, and you're with, say, a few Michael's lads and you're with other schools, and you'll be talking about even things that happened 8, 9, 10 years ago, and they'll be like, here, just forget about it, get on with it. And the whole point is, they were such great times that clearly you didn't get to experience. You view school in a different light than we do. It was such an influential part. It was the best and the worst times, whether it was to do with school, whether it's to do with your friends, or even school, the rugby side of it as well.
Yeah, but Richie, I want to just, because this is kind of more like sort of a calendar event of life, but nobody can describe what it's like to be a parent, and I'm talking for your mother as well, to have children, and to love those children is beyond any sense of imagination, or to adore them. You would throw yourself in off a cliff to save them. Seriously. And that's what Parenthood is all about. You would do anything. If some Nazi Gestapo gobshite said, right, you are the child, you would take the bullet. And that's what Parenthood is all about. Yeah. You love somebody more than you love yourself. And that's the difference between being single and being married with children. And listen, I don't criticize anybody who's single and have no children, and I understand all that. But when you have children, you'll take the bullet first.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Well, yeah, dive in front of me when.
Apart from if it's Robert, Mark, or yourself. I know. I love you equally.
And is there any, just the last thing I'm going to ask before your other sons have sent on some stuff, is there any particular moment where you as a parent, you look back on, or even at the time you thought, whether this is what being a parent's all about, or was there ever a moment where I'm trying to phrase this question to get it. So, like, was there ever a time where you just witnessed a moment with one of your sons where you were just like, this is what parenting is all about, or this is why I'm a dad?
Yeah. Well, it's obviously, and I'll talk about you in a minute, but I always had a small soft spot for Mark.
Careful now.
Soft spot. It's a swamp in Louisiana. No, a money jug. No. No, it was when he had his grommets and things like that, and he was sick in hospital once. And I just got so emotional. I stayed with him for 2 nights.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, and the first time Mark pushed away a little bit of affection, didn't want to be hugged as much as Robert and yourself did. But I just felt so loving towards the boy, and he was so worried, and he wanted me to be beside him when he was in hospital, and I stayed with him for 2 nights, slept with him in the hospital, and I always felt I just felt there's something. And that was, to me, Mark showed he did, because he used to push people away, but he needed me then, and I always was delighted I was there with him. Robert, you, the saddest, well, when we went down to Vincent's, after
Anfield disaster.
After Anfield, when you were looking back about 5 litres of feckin' Fanta, and I said, Jesus, cut down to the old Fanta, son. And then when we went into hospital and you were diagnosed with diabetes, and I looked at your face and I said to myself, and she said, it's only diabetes, and I just said, and your mother and myself just bawled our heads off. I said, you could have said, I have West Nile disease, SARS or whatever, and but anyway, I suppose that's what a family is all about. When Mark was young and baby, and Robert was lucky; he didn't have too many issues other than alcoholism and I'm only joking, Robert. No, we love, but without you 3 guys, I would not in any way be the human being I am today. Because you've given me 1 million times the pleasure that I would have got if I hadn't got you. I would have been a miserable bastard without the 3 of you. It's one of the most indefinable things about being a father. The love you have for your children and the love you have for your sons. It's indescribable. You would literally walk in front of a bus. Literally walk in front of a bus to knock them down. Sorry, I mean... sorry, to drive a bus to knock them... No, yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah. We would, listen, we'd give our lives to save each and every one of you. And I love you to bits.
Well said. I think to throw a bit of that back at you, it's important to note that, like you referred to there, the day I got diagnosed with diabetes, and I remember thinking every little bit of me that reacted to what many would take as a life-defining illness or a terrible moment in it, everything I'd learned and everything I'd learned from maybe yourself or even Colette was that, like, life does go on, and that also you need to find the best of the bad situations.
Yeah.
And the one thing I always, when someone goes, oh, what did your parents ever teach you? They taught me loads of stuff, and I could write pages, I could write a book on it. But like one of the main things is is that life can be absolutely brutal at certain stages, but how you find the good in that and just move on, I think, is the biggest thing that you and Colette, my mother, have taught me. And I think that is, to date, the most valuable thing I have, that even at this time when we're in a lockdown and we're forced to stay at home, you find the best of that bad situation. When you get told your life will never be the same, you have to stick insulin in your pork belly every single day. You find the best in that situation, and then that goes even further on from that, and even you get better perspective on that. So I haven't really got the opportunity to thank you, Mom, for that, but like, that is genuinely one of the things I'm most thankful for, is that life is a journey. You have to take the good with the bad. You have to appreciate what you have, work hard for things you don't. And I think they're all the things that you've kind of embedded into my mind, also with the aid of Colette. And I think Rob and Mark would agree with that. So I do want to thank you now, because you rarely get thanked. You mostly get abused, and comedic value is often put in front of realism. So I do want to thank you for that. And the last few things here, I've been sent on a few quick fire questions for you.
Yeah, ready for them? Yeah.
Subject to edit. But this may or may not have been sent from someone in the family.
Mm-hmm.
But the best pint of Guinness in Dublin.
I would say, subject to maybe a sort of a survey which I would conduct myself, might be Kyo's, followed by Neary's, and then if you want to go down to some slightly dodgy place near the bus station, Mulligan's, but they don't clean the glass in Mulligan's. So I would go Kyo's 1, Neary's 2, and if you want a sloppy one but good one, Mulligan's.
Okay. What was it like getting to know your in-laws?
It was like going into an alternative universe where the cast were all like goblins and Game of Thrones, and like lights flickering around the place and people jumping at you, coming out of walls and attics. No, apart from that, they were the maddest bunch of arseholes I've ever come across. Anyway, but Colette, got myself, for some odd reason, just parked the in-laws in the asylum and moved on.
Your favourite song of all time and why?
Favorite song of all time would be it would be Yesterday, because at the moment during lockdown, I'm dreaming of yesterday. In the hyperbole about yesterday when I was in Ashton's drinking creamy pints. And people were saying, "Hello, David, how are you? Hey, give us a high five.
Yeah.
Give us a huggy, baby." And then, hey, another little, Jesus, and give us a kiss. And so it'll be Yesterday by Paul McCartney.
Your favourite film of all time?
Favorite film of all time, I'm narrowing it down to a couple. For sheer brilliance and enigma, I would say The Usual Suspects. The acting was brilliant in it, and we didn't know at the end.
No spoilers.
No spoilers alert. The Royal Tenenbaums, featuring probably the greatest last, with Gene Hackman at his very best, and Angelica Houston and the Wilsons and everything. It was just a beautiful postscript to some great actors, and also a little paean to New York and the brownstone, and how crazy some of those people were, the artistic.
And second last question, your top moment with each of your sons.
Robert.
Yeah.
Yes, let's go back. Let's get this gobshite out of the way. I was in the Viceroy in Santa Monica with this other chap that wasn't supposed to be with this girl from Fitzwilliam, and we're having a drink near the swimming pool. This is Hollywood stuff, and I looked at this, what I could only describe as a vagrant, dilapidated, and then I realised it was Robert, and he came up. He said, "Hi, Dad. I'm back from Burning Man. You won't believe what happened." I said, "Robert, sit down." I said, "Robert, you look absolutely shagged." He said, "Shagged? I've been shagged for the last..." So that was one of the amazing moments of Robert. Yeah. Mark was, when I went to see him play in St. Augustine, he was playing a soccer game after being in, and I said, "Geez, I'm going down to Florida to see my son playing soccer." I said, "This is brilliant." And the previous night I was in San Amelia Island and chatting to a couple of old women who said, "You're so attractive." I said, "Well, this is my type of town." I must say, I like the blind people. Anyway, and then I went to see Mark, and he played very well against St. Augustine there. It was the university down there, and I met him, and I just felt so sad when he came off the pitch and he said, "Dad," and I was going the following day, and he gave me a hug, and I had to drive down to Savannah and everything. I just felt so sad that my son I wouldn't see him again.
Mm.
That was so sad. I remember driving down to Charleston, Savannah, and I said, I just only saw him for 20 minutes. And it was the saddest moment of my life. I said, I won't see him again for another
year. God knows how long.
And the
problem, Charles.
Well, there's a problem with the problem child. It's the problem with the problem child is he's like his feckin' old man. He's almost like a symbiotic relationship. There's almost like a DNA match. There's too much of intertwining of humor and everything, but all I can say is the love I have for all of you, but Richie and myself, because he's here, is just, yeah.
But what moment when you think of me, I've been here for 25 years?
Well, with you, Richie, it's too many moments. You know,
Just pick one.
You've had the great rugby moments, playing for state lights, everything. But I think if there's any special moments, well, we had great moments together, which Robert and Mark didn't have, which is the sad thing, because we had Borussia Dortmund, we've had Barcelona. So I feel I don't want to overstress the moments we had with you, because my son, the other two boys, are equally important to me.
Yeah.
So I just think you are a different type of animal than Robert and Mark, and you're all different, and you're artistic and everything. There's so many things I'm proud of what you've done. You have great humour and great. Let me see what would I. What's your name again?
Derek.
Oh, Derek. Shit, I thought you was Fred. No, but listen, I can't identify a moment because it's a continual situation, and I don't want to. But that we had some amazing experience together, and I don't want to say that in front of Robert and Mark, because Mark was 8 when he went to Elland Road, and they were shouting. 8 and 9-year-olds were saying, "You'll see you next Tuesday." Yeah. So anyway, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I adore both of you. And who's the other guy?
I don't know.
Sorry, Robert. Listen. It's only when you have children, and you can't sort of put that in the head of a young man. Oh, when you have your children, it's only when you have them, and that after your dying day, you love them without any sort of reason, and other than that they're yours and they're on the payroll.
Fair. And lastly, I always ask my guests this, and I'm not going to make you an exception. Sum yourself up in 3 words, Father.
Sum myself up in sad, early doors, renaissance in my 20s, and acceptance for the rest of my life.
Sad, renaissance, acceptance.
Yeah. Sad when I was young.
Yeah.
Renaissance when I'm in my 20s, and acceptance as I get older.
Okay. Well, listen, that wraps it up. We're done. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much, Richard. And
Richie. You only say Richard when you're angry.
Sorry, I beg your pardon, Richie. And where do I cash the? Where do I get the check?
The check, and my receptionist in the kitchen there will.
Oh yeah, that's her indoors, Henrietta Himmler.
Anyway, thank you, David.
Thank you indeed, Richard. It was a great pleasure.